Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I didn't realize the world was ending when I pulled into the station lot just before 6. Rain had come through overnight, left the pavement glossy. The morning crew was still inside, airing that story about local water rates. I waved at them through the glass. No one looked up. Maybe they didn't see me. Upstairs, everything was quiet. Too quiet for a newsroom 5 hours from prime time. The screens were on. The air hummed with fluorescent light, but half the desks were empty. I thought maybe it was another flu wave. We'd already lost 2 field reporters last week, both of them coughing by Thursday, gone by Friday. Then I saw him. A man in a black suit, clean-shaven, government haircut, standing in my office doorway like he owned it. He didn't flinch when I walked in, just nodded once, flatly, and handed me a sealed folder. "Jamie Ruiz?" he said. I didn't answer, not right away. I scanned the folder. No agency letterhead, just a stamped label. Priority Federal Liaison Script Control. I opened it and flipped through. 5 pages of language directives, timing blocks, instructions for how anchors were to phrase outbreak-related news segments. I recognized none of it. "This isn't ours," I told him. "We don't run scripts from outside sources unless we've verified." "You'll run this," he said, starting with the 5 o'clock health segment. He walked past me like I was part of the furniture, didn't introduce himself, just went to the control room and started talking to Derek, one of our lead prompter techs. I followed, asked Derek later what he said. Didn't say much, just uploaded something and told me not to touch the server for the rest of the week. By noon, the whispers started. Producers were saying 3 affiliate stations in our network were given the same order. 2 in the south, 1 in the northwest. Same sealed folder, same man in black. No explanations, just scripts about unusual seasonal illness trends, regional containment, and calming language. By 2 o'clock, our lead anchor, Hallie Grant, came to my desk. She looked pale. "Jamie, this thing they're making me read at 5. What's actually going on?" I didn't have an answer. At 5 o'clock sharp, we went live. Hallie stared down the camera and read the federal copy line for line. No ad-libs, no clarifications, just pre-cleared sentences delivered with a steady voice. The kind of broadcast you'd forget within the hour, until she reached the 3rd paragraph. Local residents may notice a temporary increase in emergency vehicle presence due to ongoing community wellness operations. This is normal and not cause for alarm. Normal? No one had said anything about emergency presence. No alerts from the city, nothing from police or fire. Hallie glanced at me from the desk. I nodded once, as if that would help. We stayed live for another 23 minutes, reading what amounted to nothing. After the broadcast, Hallie slammed her script on the desk. "Jamie, I've been doing this for 11 years. That wasn't a flu update." I tried to tell her I knew. I told her I'd look into it. Told her to go home. Rest. She didn't argue. That night, I stayed late to review the footage from the past 48 hours. We'd gotten some cell clips from a freelance stringer in Westport, people fainting in parking lots, some being wheeled away by EMTs in hazmat suits. No reports on the wires. Nothing about a containment order or a pathogen. I loaded one clip into the edit suite. 30 seconds, taken just after midnight at a gas station on River Road. A man's collapsed on the pavement. His hands are twitching. Someone steps in to help, then flinches back. The man's jaw starts opening too wide, like it's been broken. His eyes roll back and then he lunges. Not like a seizure, more like he's chasing something. And the person filming, you can hear her start whispering, "He bit her, he bit her." I watched it 3 times. At 12:41 a.m., my email lit up. Do not air. Federal Review Order, G-Series, Clip 134. Violation may result in license action. How did they know I had it? I shut down the suite, took the flash drive, locked it in my desk. My phone buzzed. Text from Derek. FBI in the server room. They just pulled our backup logs. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was working. I just couldn't. Not after what I'd seen. By morning, the man in black was gone, but a replacement had already arrived. We didn't get to choose our scripts anymore. We were now under something called NCC Level 3 broadcast oversight. No one told us what NCC meant. Outside, the sirens were constant. Helicopters started flying lower. The sound had changed. Less of a smooth patrol rhythm, more like circling, dipping, watching. Every few hours, a military Black Hawk would slice overhead, then vanish behind the rooftops toward the east. People in the building had started flinching when they heard the blades. Even the janitorial staff had stopped their usual chatter. I remember walking past the break room and seeing two of them watching the news feed from one of our competitors. The screen had been frozen on a wide shot of an empty downtown street, yellow tape fluttering across the corner of the frame, but no audio. I stood in the doorway and listened. Nothing but the air vents humming. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday, Channel 6 wasn't really a station anymore. Not in the way people thought of a news station. No more live field reporting. No more breaking stories, unless they were pre-approved by the liaison team. We still had the anchor desk, the graphics team, the cameras and lights, but the soul of it was missing. We weren't reporting. We were reading. The morning meeting took place in the green room. No coffee, no bagels. Nobody asked why the door was closed this time, or why the windows were covered. Only a few of us even spoke. "National Guards at the old ferry terminal," said Tom, one of our overnight editors. "Saw 3 trucks roll in before sunrise." "Guard?" I asked. "Not just state troopers?" No insignia I recognized, and they weren't carrying less lethals. I didn't reply. The clipboard in my lap held a printed run of the day's show order, each segment marked with override, and a set of bullet points written in government language, too clinical to be accidental. One line stood out. Avoid terms like infection, bite, spreading, zombies, reanimation. Use, community response, public health guidance, disturbance-related injuries. It would have been funny if it wasn't real. I crossed out the word zombies with my pen even though we weren't going to say it anyway. It just felt wrong seeing it printed like that. Like someone in a suit somewhere had made a decision that those words were now taboo. That same afternoon, I got a message from a contact at the University Medical Center, Dr. Miranda Quezada, trauma lead, someone I'd interviewed 2 years ago during a major train derailment. Her text was short. "Jamie, I don't know what they told you, but this isn't a virus. We've seen neural decay on patients before death, like the brain is being rewritten. It's not flu. It's not rabies. Stop saying that." I tried to call her, straight to voicemail. We were already prepping the evening rundown when one of the floor assistants, a kid named Kenny, ran up the hall from master control. I hadn't seen him since Monday. He was out of breath and visibly sweating, even though the building's AC was running full tilt. "Someone hacked the sat link," he said. "There's a loop playing over the primary relay. I think it's coming from somewhere in-state. Not us. Not national." "What loop?" I asked. He just pointed at the hallway monitors. We walked together, fast. Down in the engineering wing, the monitors flickered, glitched, and resolved into a wide, stationary camera shot. Looked like a home office. No banners. No logos. A man sat in front of the camera, mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a red windbreaker. He spoke in a whisper, but the mic was strong enough to catch every word. "If you're seeing this, do not go to any designated assistance zone. Do not trust the buses. The screenings are not medical. They are trying to slow panic by bottling it. My sister was one of the doctors assigned to the civilian checkpoint outside Ridge Park. That's gone now. She tried to warn me. Please, do not trust what's on the news. It's worse than that." He looked over his shoulder, then reached forward and disconnected the feed. The screen cut to static. "Where did that come from?" I asked Kenny. He shook his head. "Same relay as the Department of Emergency Broadcasts. It piggybacked in." "Can we record it?" "I already did." I told him to get it off the system, to pull it onto a flash drive and unplug the workstation. He hesitated, asked me if we were going to run it. I didn't answer, because I knew we wouldn't, and by midnight, we couldn't. That night was the first of the brownouts. Power in the upper floors flickered. Cell service died for nearly an hour, then returned. Barely. The internet was choked down to nothing. Our backup satellite system, normally used for live field uplinks, was blocked. Every time we tried to patch to the network server, we got a dead connection and a red warning. Primary path restricted. Please contact your federal liaison. Only no one knew where he was. Derek said he'd left around 4, said something about a containment protocol. No forwarding contact, no handler, just gone. The door to his makeshift office was locked, and someone had taped a sheet over the window. No one knew what was inside. I went home just before 2 a.m. Thursday. First time I'd left the station in 3 days. I hadn't packed a go bag, hadn't charged my phone fully, hadn't done a grocery run. The streets were quiet, too quiet, and all the traffic lights were flashing yellow. I passed a grocery store on 9th Avenue. 2 patrol cars in front. No headlights. Just officers sitting inside the vehicles, staring at the building. When I turned the corner to my place, I saw what the rumors were about. A neighborhood health checkpoint had been set up near the old rec center, just 4 blocks from my apartment. Tents, camouflage trucks, tall lights powered by noisy generators, civilians standing in line. Some were coughing, but not all. Others looked off, tense, like they knew something wasn't right. I kept my eyes forward and didn't stop. Inside my apartment, everything was still. I poured water into the kettle and just stood there, listening. My neighbor's dog wasn't barking. No sound from the street. When I turned on the radio in the kitchen, all I got was static on the local news frequencies. I finally found something on a lower FM band, a calm male voice repeating, "This is an emergency civil alert. Remain indoors. Do not attempt to leave your residence after 10 p.m. Stay tuned for further instructions." It looped every minute, then silence. I turned off the radio. At 3:40 a.m., someone pounded on the door. Hard. 3 times. I didn't answer. The hallway was quiet when I finally opened it, hours later. Just a single smudge on the doorknob. I wiped it off with an old dish towel and threw the towel into a trash bag. Back at the station by noon, the situation had shifted again. Half the newsroom didn't show. Our makeup lead, Janine, was gone. Hallie never came back after her last segment. Her desk was cleared out. No one even told me. The newsfeed we ran that day was nearly identical to the last. Federal copy, carefully worded PSAs, repeating emergency numbers that rang endlessly. No new footage, no live segments, no weather. Someone pulled me aside. Alan, from IT, said he'd heard on the ham relay that an outbreak occurred inside one of the FEMA camps set up near the interstate loop. People locked inside, National Guard called in, but none of it was in the official briefings. That night, the lights in the West Wing failed completely. We operated by flashlight. 2 editors left before sundown, said they needed to check on family. Never returned. When I walked into the studio to prep the last broadcast of the day, the floor manager asked me, "Are we the only ones still pretending this matters?" I didn't answer. I walked to the desk, checked the mic levels, nodded at the teleprompter tech. The cameras went live, and the anchor began to read. "This is a special update from the National Crisis Emergency Council. Remain in your homes. Do not attempt to relocate unless advised by a certified government agent. Emergency assistance will be provided." Her voice cracked on the word provided. We went to black. Then the signal cut. Dead. Mid-broadcast. That was the last night we transmitted on schedule. And it was the last night I saw the newsroom intact. When I stepped into the building Friday morning, something was wrong with the air. It wasn't the HVAC. It still hummed faintly above, though the lights on the lower floors were dimmed to emergency mode. It was the silence. A different kind than before. The kind that hangs after something has broken. The lobby was empty. No receptionist. No badge check. The security desk monitor looped frozen footage of the parking garage. I recognized one of the camera angles. It was pointed at the van we used for remote uplinks. The back doors were open. Nothing moved inside. The elevator wasn't working. I had to take the stairs. My legs burned by the 6th floor, but I kept going. When I reached the newsroom level, I found the main hallway door propped open with a chair. The lights overhead were flickering, I hesitated just outside, listening. A muffled radio crackle, something shifting, then a voice from deeper in the building. Sharp, urgent, not yelling, but close. I stepped in, slowly, staying near the wall. The main newsroom floor was half lit, monitors dimmed to screensaver blues, chairs overturned, coffee cups still half full. It looked like people left in a hurry. I moved past the editing bay. There were cables trailing across the floor. A laptop was smashed against the doorframe. No blood, no obvious signs of violence, just wreckage. In the producer's pit, I found Derek. He was crouched behind one of the desks, trying to get a signal on a handheld transceiver. His face was drawn tight, shadows under his eyes like bruises. "Jamie," he said, "you're still here." I didn't know what else to say. I asked him what happened. "They came in around 4, he said. "Feds, not liaison types, guys in full tactical, no insignia. Told everyone to shut down all feeds, lock out external comms, confiscated the SAT drives. One guy went straight for server room, pulled the RAID array right out the rack." "Did they say why?" "They didn't say anything, just kept moving. No names, no IDs. One of them had a case handcuffed to his wrist, the kind you see in spy movies." He paused. "2 producers tried to leave early. I think they were trying to sneak out the back stairwell. We never saw them come back." I moved toward the anchor desk. The chair was tipped. The prompter screens were cracked. On the floor, one of the federal briefing folders lay open, same kind as before, but this one had only 1 page. A printed sentence in bold. "Do not transmit under any circumstance. Failure to comply will be considered a national security breach." There was no signature, no agency, just a black stamp at the bottom. NCC V42, final. Derek followed me to the tech booth. The studio's internal system was still running, but the signal path to the network was fried. He showed me a burnt coaxial junction pulled from the wall. "They didn't just disable us," he said. "They made sure we couldn't bounce anything out, not even on shortwave." "What about direct-to-uplink?" "Dead. Both dishes jammed. They microwaved our fallback channel too." I leaned against the frame, thinking. In the silence, I became aware of something else. Movement above us. Not the creaks of old infrastructure, but real movement. Weight. Boots. I looked at the ceiling. The light panels rattled faintly. We weren't alone in the building. I asked Derek if anyone was still upstairs in the offices. "No one. Legal bailed Thursday. HR never came in today. I think most people got the message." A hallway alarm chirped once, then cut off. Derek flinched. We didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I want to show you something." He took me down past Studio B, past the graphics suite, and into the old archive vault. Years ago, the basement vault had been where we kept tapes, reels, old promo segments. Now it was just storage. Dusty boxes, decommissioned gear. But someone had cleared a space in the back corner, a single desk, a folding chair, a backup server plugged into a generator stack. Derek tapped the screen. A file opened. Video, no timecode, just a fixed angle shot of a loading bay. Night vision engaged. There were 6 people in the frame, civilians. 1 woman in hospital scrubs, others in coats, one with a blood-soaked towel around his neck. They weren't moving. They weren't dead, but they were off, shaky, slack-jawed. One of them had his arm twisted behind his back at a wrong angle, but didn't seem to notice. Another kept opening and closing her mouth like she was tasting the air. Then the bay doors opened. Someone entered. Full tactical gear, gas mask, carrying a thermal scanner. He stepped in, scanned each person one by one. When he got to the man with the twisted arm, he hesitated, raised a flare gun. The camera jerked, static hit. When it came back, the 6 were gone. "I pulled this off a local hospital's network node," Derek said. "Their security camera log. I only got this one clip before the feed was scrubbed." I watched it again. I noticed something the second time. The eyes. They weren't clouded over like in horror movies. They were clear, sharp, focused, but wrong. Too still, too direct. "What are they?" I asked. "Not sick," Derek said. "Or not just sick. This isn't about symptoms, it's about behavior. We left the vault in silence. Back upstairs, the main doors were sealed. We moved to the rear stairwell. Derek kept a fire axe in his grip. I held a flashlight, though my hand shook enough to blur the beam. Each floor down was darker than the last. On the fourth, we found dried footprints across the tile. Bare footprints. No shoes, no socks, just human outlines, dried into the dust like someone walked through the place slowly, silently, leaving no trail behind except those prints. We reached the ground level. The emergency lights near the loading dock still worked. We found one of the field vans had been ransacked, cables pulled, equipment taken, but the fuel tank was half full. That was when we heard it, outside, not near, but not far. A screech, not human, not animal, more like metal shearing, stretched through a throat. Then a low, rapid thumping. Derek whispered, "Upstairs." I hit the lock on the van and grabbed the spare comms unit from the back. We moved fast, quietly. No talking, just the shuffle of feet on concrete and the stifled breaths we didn't want to hear out loud. Back in the stairwell, something changed. A smell, like burned rubber or old meat, spoiled, but dry. I stopped on the second floor and listened again. The thumping had stopped. Now it was footsteps. Real ones. Slow, methodical. Derek mouthed, "Third floor." We ducked into the AV lab and shut the door. Waited. The hallway outside creaked. Floor tiles flexed. We saw a faint shadow under the crack. Someone stood just beyond, then leaned forward. We could hear it sniffing the air. No sounds of breath. Just a dry rasp. Shallow, precise. The door handle moved. Once, twice, then silence. We waited 20 minutes before moving again. We didn't leave the building that night. We sealed the archive room and slept in shifts. Derek had a taser. I had nothing but a broken mic stand sharpened to a point. The next morning, the sky outside the loading bay was orange with smoke. Somewhere in the city, fires were burning unchecked. The roads were empty. No civilian traffic, no official presence. Just husks of cars on the shoulder, some with doors open, others shut and abandoned. Derek and I stood there for a while, watching, listening. We heard one more scream, then another, then silence. "This is done," I said. "We're not getting back on the air." He nodded. We both knew it. We loaded what we could into the van. Cameras, batteries, cables, whatever backup power cells hadn't been yanked during the shutdown. I swept the break room vending machines, knocking loose the metal grate on the bottom row just to get to the last few stale granola bars and packs of instant noodles. I even grabbed a half-used roll of duct tape and an expired first aid kit from under the microwave, just in case. Derek, more methodical than me, was already outside, wedging gear cases under blankets and strapping down boxes with what looked like torn extension cords. He'd managed to strip the emergency band receiver out of one of the dead field kits and was wiring it into the dashboard like an old-school cop radio. I had no idea if it would even pick up anything anymore, but it felt like something, like trying. The most important things went into my own duffel, labeled tapes, black drives marked with grease pencil, and 2 USB sticks wrapped in foil and stuffed in the lining of my jacket. These weren't the stories we'd been told to tell. These were the truth. Raw, unstable, sometimes uncut, but real. The footage that got flagged, pulled, locked down. Snapshots of the collapse from angles no one had intended the public to see. If no one would let us broadcast the truth, I'd carry it myself. I still hadn't seen one in person, but I felt them. Their presence hung in the air like ozone before a lightning strike. It lived in the broken symmetry of things that should have been whole. A wheelchair tipped in an empty corridor, a blinking call button no one had pressed, a vending cup spinning endlessly in a jammed dispenser. It was in the flicker of an emergency light overhead with no tech left to fix it, in the thick silence of a hallway that should echo with life, in the way even the birds had stopped singing, as if instinct had warned them long before we knew to be afraid. By midday, we rolled out from the underground loading bay. The big metal gate groaned as it lifted, screeching against wind and rust. It hung there halfway for a moment, and I thought, if this fails now, If it crashes down, we're just going to be two bodies in a news station no one will ever come back to. But it didn't. It lifted high enough. And Derek, hands tight on the wheel, gunned the engine. The van jolted forward, heavy with gear and dread. Outside, the city had changed again. The light wasn't right. It wasn't just dim. It was wrong. A thick, yellowish haze had settled over everything, giving the skyline the look of an old photograph left too close to heat. The streets, once blinding with motion and noise, were now soft and still. Not dead exactly, just disconnected. The hum of a world in standby mode, waiting for a signal that would never come. Papers drifted across the intersection. Flyers, receipts, plastic wrappers, all moving in slow spirals like nervous birds avoiding predators. Every traffic light blinked the same dull amber, casting a sick glow on the intersections where no cars passed. Every storefront was sealed with some version of a lie. Closed for sanitization, back in 48 hours, stay home, stay safe. None of them had been touched in days. No graffiti, no smashed glass, not even footprints, not a city looted, a city abandoned. As if something deep and primal had rung through the bones of everyone at once, telling them to get out, to leave everything behind, and not look back. We kept off the main roads. Derek's hands gripped the wheel with quiet tension as we threaded through back streets and service alleys. Once, we passed a garbage truck on its side, wheels still spinning lazily. A torn biohazard bag lay half unwrapped nearby, its contents spilling across the street. Gloves, sealed tubes, a bloodied mask. Neither of us said anything. Derek mentioned he'd heard chatter over a shortwave channel. Someone had been broadcasting on an encrypted FEMA band from the north side of the city. Said the highways are no-go, he muttered. Blocked off by the guard in most places, some by accidents, others by... He didn't finish. I didn't ask. Every time we crossed another empty intersection, I scanned the rooftops, the balconies, the darkened windows for any movement. I wasn't even sure what I expected to see. A signal, a face, a rifle. We passed a playground near a middle school. The swing set sat in crooked silence. One of the seats moved, just slightly, back and forth in the still air. Not fast, not slow, just off, like it had been touched long after the rest of the world decided not to. Past that was a firehouse, its doors wide open, no trucks inside. An axe was embedded in the wall beside a rack of missing gear. On the pavement out front, white chalk lines were scattered and half washed away by grime. Not drawings, notations, measurements, human outlines. No bodies, just stains. In the rearview mirror, I kept checking our six. I don't know why. There was nothing behind us. No headlights, no bikes, no patrol cars. But I never shook the feeling. It followed us like static. Something under the skin of the world, not quite visible, not quite audible, just there. Once, Derek reached over and turned off the fan. He thought he heard something outside. Breathing maybe, or whispering wind through the trees that lined the old industrial park we passed. I leaned toward the open window and listened. It was just silence, heavy and full of things unsaid. A shadow passed over us. We both jumped, but it was just a bird, a lone crow, wings beating hard, flying west towards something we'd already left behind. You ever think it's weird, Derek said after a long pause, that this doesn't feel like a collapse? I looked at him. It's not chaos, he continued. It's not screaming and fire and riots. It's just quiet, like the world folded in on itself and left the door open. I didn't respond, because he was right. It didn't feel like an explosion. It felt like an exhale that never turned back into a breath. Up ahead, a gas station loomed, its sign flickering. The doors were open, lights still on. We stopped long enough to scavenge water, wipes, some batteries from behind the counter. In the security mirror above the aisles, we looked like strangers. Hollow-eyed, twitchy. I saw myself and didn't recognize the frame. Clothes smudged with soot, hands dirty, jaw clenched. There was a copy of the Daily Record on the counter, 3 days old. The headline read, "Containment underway, situation improving." A red stamp across the top read, "Official update." Underneath it, someone had scribbled with a marker, "Liars." We rolled out again. The van's engine coughed once, then steadied. The city kept stretching in all directions, but nothing felt alive anymore. It was a carcass still holding heat, and somewhere out there, beyond the next turn, or the one after, we knew we'd run out of road. We made our first stop at Hallie's apartment. I wanted to see if she was still there, if she'd made it out. The front door was shut, deadbolted. We buzzed the intercom. No answer. The lobby windows had been taped in a crisscross pattern, probably to prevent shattering. I left a note tucked under the door. "Still working. If you're alive, find us. JR." We didn't stay long. Being stationary made us nervous. By late afternoon, we reached the edge of downtown. The financial district had gone dark. Every skyscraper we passed was blacked out. No elevators, no lobby lights, no motion behind the glass. Even the banks had been emptied, not looted, but simply shut off, like someone had pulled the plug on the entire block. That's where we saw the first signs that something worse had happened. A city bus rested at an angle across the intersection of 12th and Grandview. One side of it had been scorched, charred streaks across the windows, melted rubber pooling beneath the tires. The front windshield had been kicked out from the inside. On the street, dried streaks of something dark, blood probably, painted looping arcs toward the gutter. Nearby, the remains of a barricade lay scattered, riot shields, tear gas canisters, and a collapsed sign that read, "Stop, medical screening ahead." No bodies, but no signs of life either. Derek slowed the van. We both stared at the bus. "There were people on there," I said quietly. He nodded. They tried to turn it around. Neither of us spoke after that, not until we reached the substation. Our backup location had always been a small repeater site about 15 miles east, tucked behind a storage yard and a regional power junction. We'd used it once during a blackout 3 years ago when the city lost grid for 72 hours. It was primitive, but it had what we needed: shortwave gear, a backup generator, a modest transmission antenna, and enough redundancy in its systems to run basic output. If we were going to get anything out, audio, video, even raw files, it had to be from there. The chain-link gate was open when we arrived. No sign of forced entry, but the padlock had been cleanly cut. Inside, the outer door was ajar. I grabbed the mic stand, still sharpened at the tip, and led the way. The main room was untouched. Dust still clung to the monitors. The air inside was stale, but not foul. Someone had unplugged the main console, and a half-finished thermos of coffee sat beside it, long since cold. Whoever had been here last left in a hurry, but not under duress. Maybe they got called away. Maybe they thought they'd be back. We powered the system manually, using the inverter Derek kept in the van. Lights came up, dim and flickery, but functional. I checked the outbound panel. No obvious sabotage. The transmitter's indicator blinked amber, still capable of signal. That gave me an idea. If we couldn't broadcast full video, we could still send compressed frames, snapshots. We could pick the most incriminating images, layer them with time codes, broadcast stills over looped radio frequencies, bury them into the bands used for emergency alerts. "People are listening," I said. "If we show them something real, just once, it might stick." We got to work. I loaded one of the hard drives into the decoder unit and pulled up the footage. Not the polished stuff, not the studio interviews or B-roll, the real material. The clips that got rejected, flagged, seized. The first was from a traffic cam, 5 people walking along an overpass. The lead one starts limping, then stops entirely. He turns and faces the others. His shoulders twitch, then he pounces. No build-up, no warning. He grabs a woman beside him by the neck and drives her over the guardrail. Another showed a hospital corridor, medical staff barricading a room with gurneys. Inside, shapes moved behind a door. Someone screamed. Then the door burst open. The third was the gas station footage I'd seen earlier. The man on the ground, the wide jaw, the bite. I scrubbed through hours of this, clip after clip. None of it had ever aired. I assembled a reel, silent, brutal, undeniable, and began splicing it into a timed sequence. Every 30 seconds, a new clip, intercut with simple text. This was real. You were never shown. You are not safe. We tried uploading through the repeater's data line. Blocked. Then through the backup. Scrambled, but it pushed out 7% before halting. I leaned back in the chair. It's something, I said. Derek exhaled through his teeth. It's not enough. That night we camped inside the substation, huddled near the generator rack. We didn't risk lights, just kept the door barred and rotated watch. In the early hours, I saw a figure move across the gravel yard. Too far to see clearly. It didn't run, just moved. Smooth, like it was drifting. Then another. We stayed inside. The next day we picked up chatter on the open band. It was faint, half garbled, but one phrase came through clearly. Zone 4 compromised. Units advised to withdraw. No civilian extractions. Broadcast containment has failed. We exchanged a look. Then we heard the scream. Closer this time. Human, but twisted. Like someone trying to hold back pain and failing. Then footsteps. Fast, bare, slapping against gravel. Then silence again. Derek turned to me. We need to go. I agreed, but before we left, I burned copies of everything onto a new drive. Marked it in red ink. Last Arable Truth, Ruiz. If we died, I wanted someone to find it. We packed the van again. No destination this time. Just away from the station, away from known broadcast zones. The government wouldn't let the story out. Not willingly. There was no point in following major arteries anymore. The freeways had long since become choke points, either sealed by barriers or jammed with the dead weight of vehicles left mid-flight. Derek pulled up an old map and plotted a course east, tracing narrow backroads and utility corridors. His plan was to bypass the checkpoints and make it to the outskirts of the city, maybe even beyond the suppression zone. If we could find one ridge or relay tower they hadn't knocked out, we'd have a shot at getting a wide signal out. We drove in silence for most of the morning. A breeze moved the smoke around, giving brief moments of clarity between blocks of haze. Somewhere along the way, we passed an abandoned patrol car with all 4 doors open. No signs of damage, no blood. Just sitting in the middle of the road like the officer had stepped out for lunch and never returned. The roof lights still blinked red and blue, casting lazy strobes over the cracked asphalt. Around noon we passed through what used to be a shopping district. Most of the storefronts had been ransacked. Windows broken, mannequins toppled, but not all the destruction looked random. Some of it looked intentional, controlled. Power junctions melted with thermite, security cameras shattered but left in place. One large appliance store had every piece of broadcast-capable equipment missing, racks stripped to the walls. It wasn't looters, it was cleanup, suppression. I knew the signs. I'd covered those types of operations abroad, back when information dominance was still just a phrase in briefing rooms. We rolled past them and continued east. By 2 in the afternoon, Derek said we were 10 minutes from a service turnoff that would lead us under a rail overpass and toward an old repeater tower he remembered from his college internship. It was when we reached the overpass that everything began to change. The road curved gently toward a narrow intersection that dipped into a small industrial corridor. Auto shops, parts warehouses, and a county waste depot. At the bend, we saw them. Ahead, stretched across the intersection, stood a military checkpoint, concrete barriers forming a wedge, sandbags stacked along the shoulders, and 2 tan Humvees idling just inside the barricade. A trio of soldiers stood near the center of the road, rifles lowered but ready. Their posture wasn't relaxed. No hand waves, no traffic guidance. Just 3 armed men watching a dead road. We were maybe 80 yards out when they noticed us. "Turn around," I said. "Now." Derek didn't speak. He simply twisted the wheel, moving us into a wide arc to loop around and backtrack the way we came. That's when we heard the first pop, not a warning shot, a crack, then another. One of the side mirrors exploded in a spray of glass. The van swerved. Derek floored the gas. The tires barked against the pavement as we tore forward into a tighter loop, ducking down into a side alley behind a welding supply shop. Bullets clanged off the rear bumper as we disappeared behind the corrugated walls. "What the hell was that?" Derek hissed. They didn't want us backing out, I said. They wanted us stopped. I checked my side. No blood, just adrenaline and noise in my ears. Derek pulled the van into a narrow garage behind the building, killed the lights, and coasted to a stop. We sat in the dark for a moment, breathing, listening. No shouts, no boots, no radios, just distant wind and the crackle of old flyers twisting in the air. I cracked the side door and peeked through a busted window. The street behind us was empty, but the checkpoint was still visible from the corner. 2 of the soldiers had moved forward, one crouched behind a barrier, rifle raised and scanning. I reached back for the field lens from our camera kit and trained it down the street. That's when I noticed it. They weren't watching us. They were watching something beyond us, past the buildings, past the alley. One of the soldiers raised his hand to signal something, then turned. Another crack of gunfire, but not aimed at us. Then a burst, automatic, short, controlled. I looked back at Derek. Something's coming. We didn't wait to find out what. We moved through the rear exit of the shop, staying low, cutting through the warehouse lot, ducking under rusted scaffolding, and slipping behind dumpsters. The van was compromised. The gear was still inside, but if we stayed with it, we'd just become targets again. As we moved, I heard a new sound. Not the gunfire, not the boots. A different sound, a dragging rhythm. A low, pulsing shuffle, like shoes skimming pavement in uneven strides. Then the occasional thud, like something heavy hitting metal, but not with force, with persistence. Repetition, like probing. We crouched behind an old delivery truck, watching the alley mouth where we'd come in. The first one emerged slowly, almost casually. A man, or what had once been a man, shirtless, skin pale and tight across the frame, jaw slack. His feet were raw, leaving dark prints behind. His right leg dragged at a crooked angle, but he didn't seem to notice. Behind him came another. This one moved faster. A woman in a shredded red blouse, hair caked in something dark, arms stiff. Her head ticked to the side in an unnatural motion. Fast, then still, then fast again, like a puppet with a broken string. Derek's breath hitched beside me. I didn't speak. I couldn't. We watched as they reached the barricade. One soldier opened fire, controlled, short bursts. The man dropped. The woman didn't. She took 3 rounds to the chest, spun slightly, then kept moving. Another soldier shouted something. Couldn't make it out over the echo, but he stepped back. Then more of them came. From side alleys, from doorways, from behind parked vehicles. 10, 15, some limping, some running. All converging toward the barricade with no hesitation, no cover, no communication. Just forward motion, mouths open, limbs stiff. The soldiers opened fire in full. Muzzle flashes lit the barricade. But not all of the infected dropped. One leapt over the hood of a Humvee like it didn't know gravity mattered. Another smashed face first into the barrier, teeth cracking against the concrete. I couldn't move. I wasn't watching a riot. I wasn't watching an outbreak. I was watching a shift in the laws of the world. The soldiers panicked. One of them fell. 2 more backed into the Humvee, firing point blank into something that kept crawling even as chunks of it came apart. The one who had signaled earlier screamed as his rifle jammed. Derek grabbed my arm and whispered sharply, "Jamie, now, back through the shop." We moved in silence, cutting through the warehouse again, this time deeper. The noise behind us grew louder, gunfire, then screaming, then nothing at all. We reached the rear wall, found a broken service ladder, and climbed onto the rooftop. From there, the street opened wide before us. Smoke curled upward. One of the Humvees was on fire. No soldiers in sight. But the infected were still moving. Not running anymore. Just spreading, fanning out like spilled. And I finally saw their faces. Not monstrous, not twisted into rage. Just empty, hollow, dead in every way except motion. I leaned against the rooftop wall and whispered, "Now I've seen them." We stayed low and waited for nightfall. And for the first time since this all began, I no longer wondered if the news would ever go back on air. From the rooftop, we watched the infected drift. That's what it looked like. Drifting. Not aimless. Not curious. just standing until something gave them cause to move. They didn't search like people do. They didn't shuffle randomly like we'd seen in old movies. They simply waited, silent, still, heads tilting now and then, as if listening for something no human ear could pick up. The street that had erupted in fire and gunshots an hour earlier now looked like a war museum. Burnt-out vehicles, shattered glass, debris from panicked retreat. And in the middle of it, a dozen of them stood in place, motionless. Some turned slightly, some remained frozen, and one had its face pressed against the side of a truck like it had forgotten it was solid. A soundless tableau of death suspended in the glow of the burning Humvee. We stayed down, crawling behind rusted ductwork and the low concrete lip of the rooftop. Derek pulled a flattened box over himself to block any reflections. I did the same, holding still even as the smoke started stinging my eyes. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The sky darkened further as a curtain of heavy clouds gathered overhead. It threatened rain, but held back, leaving the air thick and electric. I checked my watch. 34 minutes since the last shot. Still no movement. "I think they've gone," I whispered. Derek slowly peeked over the edge, scanned the street below. "No," he whispered back. "They're still there." He passed me the lens again. I raised it and looked. He was right. They were standing exactly where we'd last seen them. Same poses, same slack arms. The fire had died down, leaving only drifting embers that caught in the wind like glowing snow. One of the infected swayed slightly, not because of any disturbance, but as if testing gravity. Another's fingers opened and closed slowly, over and over, like it was waiting for something to touch. "They're not patrolling," I said quietly. "They're just waiting." Derek exhaled slowly. We moved past them, quiet, one at a time. I nodded. There was no choice. We dropped down the backside of the building into a service stairwell that led to the alley. It was tight, steep, and the lowest landing was covered in soot, probably from earlier fires. At the door we waited again, pressed flat to the wall. No sounds, just distant groans of a city dying in pieces. Derek opened the door a crack and listened. I followed him out. We stayed low, sticking to shadows and tight gaps between buildings. Dumpster to fence, fence to burned-out SUV, SUV to loading dock. Every step felt deliberate. Every scrape of gravel or shoe against concrete made my throat tighten. We passed the outer line of the checkpoint, what was left of it. One body in camo lay face down, motionless. A rifle nearby, bent in the middle like someone had tried to tear it in half. I didn't look at the face. The infected stood just ahead, 10 yards away, between us and the only open route east. One leaned against the fender of the truck. Another stood inside the shell of a bus stop. Their faces were turned slightly, angled like animals catching scent. Still no motion. Derek gestured silently, move right along the storefront, then duck behind the row of newspaper boxes. I nodded, waiting for him to go first. He slipped past the corner like vapor, no sound, no stumble, just gone. I followed. We moved in short bursts, 5 feet, wait, 6 more, pause, then I stepped on it. A shard of glass beneath my boot gave a short, high crack, not a loud one, barely a whisper, but in that moment, it was deafening. The closest one turned instantly, no lag, no rising tension, just movement, abrupt, jerking, like a mechanism switching states. Its arms shot out slightly, knees bent, and it began to approach. Not in a run, in a straight, steady line. Another joined it, then a third. I froze. My body wouldn't respond, because I recognized one of them, even in the soot, even under the blood, even with the wounds along her face. I knew her. Janine, our makeup lead, the one who used to hum during sound check, who always had gum in her bag, who left without saying goodbye 2 days ago. Her hair was still clipped back, though half of it had matted to her skull. Her lower jaw hung open too far. Her walk had none of the rhythm I remembered. It was all wrong, all broken, but her eyes locked with mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Derek came from the side, tackled me sideways into the shadow of a delivery bay. We landed hard. My elbow scraped against a wall. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came. He pulled me up, hissed, We have to go now. Then she was on him. Not Janine anymore. Just what she'd become. Her body slammed into Derek's shoulder with a force that didn't belong to someone in that condition. It wasn't a tackle. It was more like gravity itself had been rewired and now dragged her toward him with single-minded violence. The impact sent him backward, hard, his boots slipping on damp concrete. They hit the pavement together in a tangled heap of limbs and flailing arms. He shouted, not a cry for help, not even a scream, just a raw, guttural sound. The kind you make when your body is no longer asking questions, only reacting. He threw her off, or tried to. His elbow came up fast, caught her across the cheek with enough strength to spin her halfway, but she didn't reel. She didn't even flinch. Her head twisted sharply, almost unnaturally, and her fingers clawed back toward him before her body fully turned. I remember seeing her nails. Those perfect French tips I'd noticed so many times in the makeup room, now cracked, jagged, dirt-packed, and digging into the collar of his coat. She didn't look angry. She didn't look like she recognized him. There was no rage in her expression, just blank determination, a thing doing what it was now built to do. Then her jaw widened, those ruined teeth bared, and she lunged downward. I saw her bite before I heard it, the angle of her neck, the way her hands locked him down by the shoulders. It was practiced, or programmed. Her teeth sank into the curve of his neck just above the collarbone. No hesitation, just pressure, tearing, then stillness. Derek screamed once, short, sharp, and his legs kicked instinctively, his heels scraping against broken asphalt. He shoved at her with both arms, even as the blood began to soak his shirt. I lunged in, grabbed her by the shoulders, and tried to rip her away, but her weight was different now. Dense, like she wasn't resisting my force, but simply didn't acknowledge it. I dug my fingers into her shoulder blades and pulled with everything I had. Nothing. She clung to him like a magnet, or a parasite. Then Derek turned his face to me, and in that single glance, between the panic and the pain, I saw clarity, not fear, just urgency. He grabbed my wrist, smeared with blood, and his grip locked down with more strength than I expected. His mouth moved. No gasp, no apology. "Run," he said. Just that, clear and final. "Don't stay, go." I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed against it. We'd made it this far together, slept in shifts, shared food, shared silence. He was the last thread connecting me to the version of myself that used to belong in a newsroom, in a world where facts meant something, and people were still people. But something deeper took over, something older than loyalty or fear. Not instinct exactly, but the understanding that if I didn't move now, I'd never get the chance again. My body turned before my mind did. I remember the sensation, not like a decision, but like falling into a current. My legs kicked into motion, and the alley pulled away behind me. My boots hit pavement, cracked and damp with runoff. My arms pumped without coordination. I could hear my own breath but not feel it, like I was underwater. The world narrowed to a series of obstacles, piles of debris, a rusted-out shopping cart, the bent skeleton of a bicycle. I vaulted a low barrier, stumbled on the landing, caught myself, and kept moving. Behind me, I didn't hear a second scream, and that was worse. I crossed through an open gate into a loading dock and ducked through the warped metal frame of a door. Inside, shadows swallowed everything. I kept going, half blind, half delirious, into the back hall of a building that hadn't felt human in weeks, maybe months. A narrow corridor opened up before me. The walls were tagged with faded graffiti. The air was thick, sour, stale. Somewhere behind a door, something dripped steadily onto concrete. I collapsed against a stack of old wooden pallets and slid to the ground. And finally, I stopped. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse the world. I just sat there, arms limp, breath catching in my throat, vision blurred from the adrenaline burning itself out. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't form fists. My back pressed against the wall, cold and damp, and my jaw hung open, useless. The only thing I could hear, over and over again, was the echo of that final moment. Not the scream, not the blood. His voice. Run. He had known, not just that it was over for him. He knew what I needed to do before I even did, and that somehow made it worse. I stared at the wall for what must have been hours. Light shifted across the broken panes high above. The world didn't end in a roar. It didn't stop moving for grief. Somewhere, far off, a car alarm warbled weakly, then stopped, then nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. The light filtering through the high windows shifted from charcoal grey to dull steel, never quite brightening into a full day. Morning came as a change in tone, not a return of the sun. The city still groaned under the weight of smoke and silence. I remember pressing my palms flat against the concrete floor, just to feel something real. My limbs ached from stillness, but I couldn't convince them to move. Eventually I stood, not because I felt ready, because I couldn't stay in that place with what had happened. The rain had passed. It left the pavement wet and mottled with silt. Outside, I moved with caution. Not stealth, not panic, just deliberate quiet. The infected weren't visible, but I'd learned the hard way they didn't need to be. They waited like coiled wire, triggered by sound, motion, maybe even scent. You didn't see them coming. You just made one wrong move, and then they were there. I took side streets. Between two collapsed sheds, I found an old aluminum bike frame with warped wheels. Useless for speed, but it made a decent carrying rack. I lashed the gear bag to it and wheeled it beside me like a makeshift cart. My back hurt from the weight of the drives, but I wouldn't leave them behind. A few blocks northeast, I crossed the tracks behind a shipping yard and came to a long, overgrown path that led through a concrete drainage corridor. That part of the city had once been a light industrial zone, but most of the buildings were vacant even before everything collapsed. According to Derek's notes, one of the relay towers was up that way, an old radio test site used by the fire department in the early 2000s. Short range, obsolete. But it had two things that mattered: elevation and a direct line of sight east. I reached the base of the hill by mid-afternoon. Most of the climb was along a cracked maintenance trail swallowed by tree roots and half-collapsed fencing. My legs burned. The gear bag dragged at every step. I caught my breath behind a transformer box halfway up and scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Not birds, not branches, not even the wind. At the top I found the tower. It wasn't much. Just a 30-foot pylon with a bent dish and a wire-laced equipment box bolted to a concrete pad. Someone had tried to rip out the cabling months ago, probably for scrap, but the repeater itself was intact. There were solar panels overhead, and to my surprise, the backup battery still had charge. Not much, but enough to power the deck and maybe give me one shot at broadcasting. I unpacked everything, set up the microphone, plugged the drive into the deck. The system booted up with a low series of beeps, slow and sickly like an old man waking up from a coma. I linked the transmission module to an open band just above emergency weather frequencies. Not much reach, but maybe enough to hit an old car radio, a handheld, a station someone left on. I hit record. I didn't rehearse. I didn't plan. I just spoke. I gave them my name. I told them what I saw. I gave dates, places, names of the dead. I described what we weren't allowed to air. I said the words they'd banned from every newsroom I'd ever worked in. Infection, bite, spread, incurable, reanimation, mutation, collapse. I played the clips, one by one, unedited. No soundtracks, no headlines, just raw footage, police body cams, hospital hallways, the bus that burned. Derek's voice on the repeater. I said everything we'd been silenced for. Then I closed with one line. If you hear this, you're not alone, and you deserve the truth, even if it's the last thing I ever send. I reached for the transmit button, and that's when I heard it. A vehicle. Not distant. Not slow. Fast. I ducked behind the repeater box, heart clawing for rhythm. It was a military vehicle. One of the new ones. Sleek profile, matte black shell, low exhaust. It didn't roar. It hummed. Quiet. Efficient. It crested the hill from the south access road and pulled up not 50 feet from the tower. 3 men stepped out. No insignia. All in black. Not infected. Worse. They moved like they'd done this before. One carried a short-barreled weapon with a mounted thermal optic. Another had a case tucked under one arm. The third held a tablet, scanning for signals. I stayed low. I reached to pull the drive from the recorder, but the light on the deck was red. Data transmission still active. The man with the tablet turned and pointed. "There," he said. "She's broadcasting." They advanced fast. I ran. No hesitation. I left the gear. I left the bag. I dove off the rear edge of the hill into brush so dense it sliced my arms on the way down. Thorns caught my coat. My boots sank into mud. But I didn't stop. A shout behind me, then a crack. Gunfire. A tree branch exploded beside my head. I scrambled sideways into a culvert and dropped low, crawling on hands and knees through muck and runoff. The light faded quickly under the overgrowth. I crawled until I couldn't hear the men anymore. Then I crawled farther. When I finally stopped, I was in the wreckage of an old drainage system. Brick walls slick with algae, moss underfoot. I leaned against a broken pipe and caught my breath. I'd left the broadcast. I'd left the drives. But I'd hit transmit. And somewhere, for a few seconds or a few minutes, the truth had gone out. I don't know if anyone heard it. I don't know if anyone believed it. But someone might. That night, I moved again. Crossed a field beneath power lines. Hid in a collapsed barn. Ate bread that was still soft in a plastic wrap I found in one of the abandoned cars, and some water. And when I finally found a place to fall asleep and rest, I dreamed about Derek. In the dream, he wasn't screaming. He was standing in the control room, headphones around his neck, laughing at something I said about the lighting. He was alive. The world was normal, and I woke up before I could remember how it ended. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.